What it do, Mr. Khan? What it do, everybody? I got a couple of things I want to share. Now, that white SUV down there, that was my neighbor's car. And last Monday, the guy, he was standing in the basement. Last Monday, he had his car parked in a really odd way. It was kind of taking up his space and the space next to it. And most of the SUV was out in the parkway where cars come in and go out. And it was like that all night. You know, he was on medication and stuff like that. And dealing with a brain tumor. Last year he had a mild heart attack and a mild stroke. And by the grace of Yah, his auntie called over here. Didn't hear from him. She called the police to come over here and do a wellness check. And he was on the floor dying. So that saved his life then. And he had lost a lot of weight. And he went to the hospital. They took care of him a little bit. And he got his weight back. And so he went back to work and he was doing fine for a while. That was all last year. And just a month ago, you know, that same SUV, I saw him pull up in the parkway maybe 3:30 one afternoon, like he normally does when he get off work. And the lights were on. I thought he was just probably in there on the phone or something. But then, like, you know, hours later, I come back and look out the window again, and it's in the evening time, his lights are still on. I think nothing of it, you know, but, you know, like some nights I just stay up all night, sleep in the daytime. But anyway, it's like midnight, his lights are still on in the SUV. And that's kind of odd, that's kind of strange, because he's been living here like 8 years and he's never done that before. I was like, if he's got an apartment downstairs, why would he be in this vehicle? I said, okay, mind my own business. You know, my neighbors are supposed to look out for each other. So at around about 4 o'clock in the morning, I look out the window again. His lights are still on. The vehicle is still running. It's still running the whole time. So it's been on like over half a day. I said, that's enough. I slip on some shoes, I go down there. His vehicle's running, the lights are on, and nobody's in this vehicle. So I go downstairs and knock on his door, and he doesn't answer. So I called the police to come over to do a wellness check on my neighbor to make sure he was fine, because I know he had some, you know, a record of being ill and stuff. So anyway, he wouldn't open the door for the police either. So I actually ended up calling one guy who do janitorial work. I asked him, did he have the key to go in there to make sure he's all right? He said, I don't have the key to the apartments. I just clean up the outside and do the yards. I said, okay, cool. So I called the maintenance man, and he came over and let the police in, and he was just knocked out. I said, man, this guy sleeps like, he sleeps hard. You know what I'm saying? I'm a light sleeper myself, but anyhow, he was fine. So he came and turned his vehicle off. But that was last month. And then the incident about a week ago, and he didn't know how to park his car because he's under medication and stuff, dealing with a brain tumor. And so I went down there and I helped him out. And it's still parked the same way I left it. It's still parked. I parked it right there like that Monday. And so all week, his vehicle hasn't moved. And I'm like, that's not like him, because he's always coming and going. You know, he's got a daughter, he's got grandkids. He's told me he always babysitting his grandkids for his daughter and stuff like that. And so every day he's coming and going. But for a whole week, his vehicle's just sitting. But he told me after I helped him with the vehicle Monday when I parked it for him, he asked him if he can use my phone to call his boss to call off work. I let him do that. So on the way back into the building, he heading down in the basement. I'm coming back up here. He said, hey, big bro, could you check on me? I said, okay, I will. Make sure you're all right. He said, okay, cool, good looking out. So anyway, by maybe Tuesday or Wednesday, I'm down there in the basement. I knock on both his doors really hard because his vehicle hadn't moved since Monday, since I moved it. And but he didn't answer the door. So yesterday I was talking to the janitor guy that cleans up the yards and do the hallways and stuff. And I said, man, maybe we ought to go down there and check on him and do a wellness check on Jamel. And he's like, oh man, he passed away. I was like, what? I didn't even know it. Don't know what day he passed away last week, but he was gone. He was only like 50 something years old. He's from Milwaukee. So, Miss Picard, just say a prayer for his family. You know, I don't know his family. I never met any of his family members. I saw his daughter down in the yard talking to him one day. I didn't know who that was, but later on when I saw him that day, he told me that was his daughter. You know, so anyway, he was a stand-up guy. He was awake. You know that we are Hebrew Israelites and stuff like that. And sometimes me and him would just chop it up in the yard and be, rejoicing about all the good things Yah has planned for Israel, you know, in the kingdom of Yahushua Mashiach to come. And so, he'd be out there with his friends on and stuff like that. And, you know, like I said, he was a believer. He was awake. And we would just fellowship together sometime, but he's gone now. So I'm just asking everybody to lift his family up, okay? So they can get through these tough times. I guess, I already know he wasn't done paying for the vehicle, so the place where he bought it from, they just haven't come and repoed it yet. But they will find out sooner or later that he's passed away. When they don't get no payments, they'll come and get it. But anyway, Ms. Bukati, the other thing I want to talk about is that about a month ago, I spoke on the deal. I called that video Just Sharing My Thoughts. I called it Just Sharing My Thoughts, and it was March the 12th. It was talking about the Strait of Hormuz, and Iran called herself, shutting it down. And I was saying in that video, they don't have the right to do that because all waterways are open for all international traffic. And just because Iran borders the Strait of Hormuz and the Persian Gulf, that doesn't give them the right to block it or shut it down, and no other vessel could come in and out. So they're wrong about that. I mentioned that on March the 12th in a video called Just Sharing My Thoughts. And I have a little clip that I want everybody to see. And these guys are speaking on, is it right for Iran to do that or not? Because Trump said starting today, at some point, they are going to block the Strait of Hormuz because Iran is calling itself monitoring what vessels come in and out. They're making money, but they don't want nobody else to make money. So President Trump said he's going to, put a blockade on the whole Strait of Hormuz and the Persian Gulf. So Iran can't make any money off of it. I don't know what they've been waiting on because, that's the international waterway. No one single country in the world, around the whole entire world, no one single country has the right to shut any waterway. You look at my video that I did about last month on the 12th of March called Just Sharing My Thoughts. But check these guys out. And this is what is being said.
John?
Sandra, moments ago, President Trump slamming Iran over the Strait of Hormuz, calling the regime's tactics, quote, a short-term extortion of the world by using international waterways. Let's bring in John Yu, former Deputy Assistant Attorney General and law professor at UC Berkeley, who, in addition to everything else that he's done, teaches classes on the law of the sea. So, John, welcome to the program. It's perfect to have you on. I mean, is there anything you don't do? That's the question that I have. But let me ask you this question. It's an international waterway. It's covered by international law. As such, any country has the right of free passage. Yet Iran is trying to control this. Where does law come down on this?
Yeah, John, I don't know what I did to get in trouble with the dean, but yes, I was made to teach law of the sea several times at Berkeley. The way you described it, John, is exactly right. When you have two bodies of water, which are international waters, in the Persian Gulf, and then you have a strait that connects them, which is the Strait of Hormuz. International law has long said that the two nations whose territory are along the strait have no right to block passage, because otherwise you can't go back and forth between those two bodies of water. Just like in the United States, we had two lakes and a river. To be able to get back and forth, you have to have free passage in that river. That has been the law for a long time. The United States has long fought for that right, and the United States Navy deliberately goes through straits all around the world on a regular basis to make clear the right of free navigation, and that's always been the law with the Strait of Hormuz.
I was taking a look at some of the choke points around the world, and for Iran to say, look, we control the Strait of Hormuz, we're going to charge a toll, or we're going to control it, would be akin to Spain or Morocco saying that we control the Strait of Gibraltar, and you're going to have to pay to go through it. Yemen or Djibouti charging for transit through the Bab al-Mandab Strait, that we have seen Yemen cause problems there. Or Singapore charging for transit through the Singapore Strait. It just doesn't happen.
And you could get even to tougher cases. If the United States were allowed Iran to get away with this, then what about the strait between Taiwan and China? China could just close that off, say, oh, well, Taiwan's our territory, we're not going to let anyone go through there. Or we could close off what's called the Strait of Malacca, through which all the oil that gets to China, Japan, Korea, all those nations, all has to go through that strait. And anybody could close that off, I suppose, if you believe Iran. And so it's always been important ever since, and for 500 years, the right of freedom of navigation of the seas has been one of the core principles of international law. The United States has gone to war to defend that right. We went to the War of 1812 with the British to defend the right of the United States to trade with whoever we wanted to under the idea of freedom of the seas. And that principle is at stake here with the Strait of Hormuz too.
Yeah.
That's right. You see? It's principle law that any waterway in the world is international waters. Just because your country borders it, that doesn't give you the authority to say what vessels could come in or out. Iran don't have that kind of authority. That is international waters. That's what I was saying in the video a month ago. And I know what I was talking about because I read up on things like this. They don't have the right, and it's about time the United States is really going to do something about it. They call it Iran's bluff. But we'll see, what the future holds for this. But I'm calling this video Psalm 83's Meltdown. Psalm 83's Meltdown. All these nations involved in that Persian Gulf area with the Strait of Hormuz, all the nations that send vessels through there, they're all Psalm 83. This is just more confirmation that they are becoming unglued. God's turning them against each other. And it's going to eventually involve other countries that need that oil. And they also, fertilizer and stuff, food and stuff that nations transact with each other. So Iran doesn't have the authority to shut that down or block it or keep other vessels from coming in or out. They don't have that authority. They do not own the Strait of Hormuz. They do not own the Persian Gulf. You know what I'm saying? That's crazy for the rest of the world to not do nothing and let them just block it just because their country borders it. Now, what international law, if your country borders large bodies of water, what that country owns is 12 miles out into the water. That's what they own. But the Strait of Hormuz is 21 miles wide. So Iran don't own all of that. They only own, just like the United States borders the Gulf of Mexico. The part of the Gulf of Mexico that the United States own, before the international waters, way out in the middle, that the United States owned 12 miles outside into the Gulf of Mexico. Other countries can't come into their space, that 12-mile space. And it's like that for any country around the world that borders large bodies of waters. But out in the past 12 miles, any vessel from any nation could travel through the Gulf of Mexico. Just like the guy said in the video, just like I said in the video March the 12th, that, the South China Sea. China doesn't own that just because it's called the South China Sea. China, okay, you got Taiwan, is an island outside of China, and China doesn't have the right to close that water, keeping other vessels from going through there. And the United States makes sure that, it stays that way because they had a carrier out there before this stuff with Iran jumped off. They probably still got another one out there, making sure Japanese vessels, Korean vessels, South Korean vessels, and any other nation that have vessels that want to pass through there, they can do it because that's international law. But the only country in the world that seems to think that they have the authority to shut a waterway is Iran, and that is wrong. And it is about time the United States is trying to do something about it. And, he's talking about getting out of NATO because they don't want to help and stuff. And the United States got so many troops stationed in those European countries, Germany, France. They got lots of troops over there in that part of the world, in Europe, to protect them. They got military bases over there and stuff that, it's like they had an agreement. And, Trump was saying, now the other nations are part of the United Nations and the NATO don't want to help America out with this deal with Iran and the Strait of Hormuz. And he's talking about getting out of NATO and pulling some of the American soldiers from them European countries because they was there to protect them. And I understand it, but see, he's in control, Mr. Picard, and he's bringing this division between Psalm 83. You best believe it. All the years they've been a conglomerate of nations, everything mostly has been, it hasn't been perfect. You know what I'm saying? Mostly the United States and the European nations that are made up of the white people, they have the most say-so in NATO, because I've heard leaders from African countries speaking about that. And, they just let it ride because America and most of the European countries have most of the money in the world. You know what I'm saying? Besides Japan, okay, they got a lot of money and stuff too, but, it's like this is Esau's kingdom. This is Esau's kingdom. And the African countries that are part of NATO are blassos. They're blassos. And then you got the vassals. That's all a part of the white status. You know what I'm saying? So the whole world is Psalm 83. The whole world is Psalm 83 because, in every nation, Israelites have been oppressed from one degree or another. From one degree or another. The Israelites in all nations on this earth has been oppressed. Like I say, the only country that I know of that didn't have Negro slaves, so-called Negroes as slaves, was Russia. But still, a lot of Hebrew Israelites are in Russia and have experienced racism from different citizens. So, because this is Esau's kingdom. So the whole world is Psalm 83. The whole world is Psalm 83. And Yah will judge each nation, to the degree of how they oppressed the Israelites. That's what they will be judged on. And that's how they will be judged, and recompense will be handed out to each nation accordingly. But they don't, it's like, hey, I got a scripture to share too, also. Now, all these nations that don't serve Yah and walk in obedience to him, I spoke about this in my last video, but now I'm finna show everybody the scripture. I'm finna show everybody the scripture so you can see it for yourself, if you haven't already looked it up. Ephesians chapter 2, verse 2. Ephesians chapter 2, verse 2. Wherein in time past you walked according to the counsel of this world. He's talking about us. According to the prince of the power of the air. Okay? The spirit that now worketh in the children of disobedience. So the spirit of Satan works in all the children of disobedience. If no, the book of Jubilee said Yah has placed spirits among all nations of people that he has not chosen. He only chose Israel. This just more confirmation of what is saying in the book of Jubilees. Yah didn't choose no other nation. He only chose Yazarel. Okay, and the people from the nations that cling to us can escape a lot of what Psalm 83 has coming. Judgments, recompense, and retribution from Yah because of what they have done against him, kicked him to the curb, and formed their own fake white Jesus, Caesar Borgia, and the things that they have done as far as oppressing the apple of his eye, Yazarel. But they still won't admit who we are, and but that's on them. That's on them. They curse themselves as long as they hold on to Esau's kingdom and Esau's lies, the lies that this kingdom is based upon. Oppressing Yah's chosen people, and everything else about it is a lie. You know what I'm saying? So, the ball is in their court, but it is already written what Yah is going to do to Psalm 83. You know what I'm saying? So, everything was predestined. So, the majority of Psalm 83 is going to stand 10 toes down on the lies that they, formed and founded, when they created this kingdom of Esau. And Psalm 83, the spirits that Yah placed among them to lead them astray from him, and all people who are walking in disobedience to the Father Yah, they're being led by the spirits of Satan and evil spirits. And that's why most of the world just won't. They hear us telling the truth, but the spirits among them, see, Yah is causing these spirits to harden their hearts so they won't flip and join us, because he got some payback to give them because of what they have been doing to his chosen people for centuries. Won't give him glory and stuff like that. So just like Pharaoh in Africa and Egypt was oppressing the Hebrews, with hard bondage and stuff like that, and trying to kill off all the Hebrew baby boys and stuff like that, trying to exterminate our people way back then. That was genocide. They tried, but the Hebrew women and the maid and the women who delivered the babies for people that was in bondage in Egypt, they didn't kill the male babies and stuff like that. Like, they was too afraid of Yah to do that. So they didn't obey Pharaoh when he said exterminate all the male boys and let the girls live. And so our population just kept getting, more and more. You know what I'm saying? But that was Yah. That was his doing. You know what I'm saying? To counteract what Pharaoh was trying to do, Yah was blessing us with more and more children. Our population just exploded because he told Abraham that, before when he was the only one knew that Yah had chose him to start a nation. He said that he was going to have his descendants counted as the stars of heaven and as the sand on the seashores. So he had already predicted that it was going to be a lot of us. But now we don't have a nation of our own, but we're spread it around the world and everybody else's nation because they sold us. And they got to pay for that. All the way up to the time of when Yahushua Mashiach comes. It don't matter if they didn't have a slave or not. They're part of Psalm 83. Just like when we was cursed. It went from our ancestors who cursed themselves when they didn't keep Yah's laws, statutes, and commandments, all the way up to the generations, all the way up to the 21st century. We still had to suffer because of what our ancestors did and what they didn't do, being disobedient to Yah. And it applies to Psalm 83. It applies to Psalm 83. What they have done to us will be done to them. That's just scripture. But they don't have to, stop and take us up on it if they don't want to. That's on them. That's on them. But Yah has his people, he's raising us up, has raised many of us Hebrews, Israelites up around the world, speaking this truth. We're the only ones that have it. Speaking this truth, trying to tell the world the truth. See? Because only the truth will make us free. John chapter 8, verse 32. Only the truth will make us free. And so these other people from these nations, they love the dainties in this world. That's why they won't turn and start serving Yah like we are doing. They love stuff so much. I had another scripture in mind, though. Well, at the start of this, I did say I had one scripture, so I'll just leave it at that. But, I mean, like I said, I'm gonna call this Psalm 83's meltdown. so it's yet to be seen how Iran is going to respond to this blockade the United States is planning on doing to not just the Persian Gulf. I mean, not just the Strait of Hormuz, but to the whole entire Persian Gulf. There's a lot of vessels in there full of oil, and they want to come out, but Iran, man, countries in around the world should have been done something about that. Besides just the U.S., other countries, they already know the laws of the international laws of waterways, but it's astounding that no other country is trying to do anything about it. Only the United States. But we'll see what all that brings. It's just going to bring more division with Psalm 83, because they're having a meltdown right now. Okay, Mr. Paka, I'm going to just leave it at that. Until next time, may y'all bless each and every last one of you. One love and shalom.